Cool. Should we start?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, so I'm just going to do a little housekeeping before we start. So this webinar is being run by VTPC and it's being recorded so that you can view it later. Simon today is our guest speaker. He'll be talking about his swooping journey and all things canopy. There'll be a Q&A session afterwards so that if you have any questions, you can ask that. If you do ask a question, be mindful that if you speak in the microphone that you're going to show up on the screen, because I'm actually going to be recording this, so everybody who speaks will be presented on the screen. If you're not comfortable with that, you can always ask your question in the chat box. Perfect. So now we've got a couple of people joining. I'll shoot it over to you, Simon.
Okay, cool. You can hear me okay? Good stuff. Okay. Ooh, where's all my notes gone? I had some notes. Okay, cool. Hey everyone. It's interesting. I've been talking a lot with my family and with my friends. You know, I miss skydiving and stuff, but as it turns out, when you go from like about 4,000 hugs, when you go from like 4,000 hugs a week to like none, you kind of notice it a little bit, and that's kind of one of the things I've really picked up about missing skydiving is seeing all of you guys on the weekend. So it's nice to actually see you now, which is good. I guess I want to share a little bit about specifically swooping. So some of you kind of know that I've been in skydiving for 7 years now. That thing up there is actually the certificate for my first jump with the photos for my first jump as well. So it's actually February 13th, 2013. And so I kind of went hell for leather with free flying for quite a while, and found myself getting a little bit more interested in swooping, and just kind of carries you away a little bit, like anything, like a good book or a movie. So I guess I kind of want to share with you the experience specifically around the swooping stuff. You know, we can obviously talk a lot about the free flying separately, but this is specifically around canopy and what leads you there. It's not necessarily something I want to talk about getting into competition, because that's really not where everyone has to go. It's really more about if you take something that you enjoy and you work hard at it and you improve your skill set, eventually it can take you somewhere, like anything. Like chefs as an example, you know, boil some water, you make some noodles, and then suddenly bang, you're working at a Michelin-headed restaurant. I mean, it's probably not that simple, but it's just one of those things. So I guess I kind of wanted to share with you a little bit of the getting into skydiving, some of the personal challenges I had, some of the wings I've flown, maybe some of the things I've kind of always had to consistently work on, which you might actually sort of resonate with as well. Maybe some of the technical stuff around swooping that may or may not be super obvious. I've got lots of video to bring you through as well. So if at any point in time you're just talking too much, just show us some footage. We can do that. I want to talk a little bit about getting into swooping and staying motivated in swooping as well, because it's a brutal part of the sport. I'm not just talking about the injuries. I'm talking about you know, your motivation and keeping your head on the swivel. A little bit about how swooping actually works. If it's not super clear, you know, I might go a bit light on that, because the technical side is maybe not what everyone's here for. I'll talk a bit about how wings work, because maybe some of that sort of stuff is a bit mystifying, particularly with how new wings are progressing. I want to talk about some of the malfunctions I've had. I think that's a really important conversation to have, because, you know, like, we don't get to fly wings without putting ourselves at some level of risk, and it's worthwhile understanding what those risks are. I want to talk about some of the near moments I've had, and there have been 3 real near moments. I want to talk about some of the highlights as well, so it's not all doom and gloom. Talk a bit about competition, and maybe some tips and tricks about equipment and some other stuff that you might not be aware you can actually access. And we talk a bit about upsizing and downsizing and returning to skydiving after COVID. That's kind of what I want to cover. And if I kind of ramble too much, then I'll probably start cutting a few things out. So I guess getting into skydiving, early 2013, you know, I was in motorcycle racing. You know, Trent was a part of that game as well. And, you know, moving on from there, found myself in skydiving, and yeah, got into tunnels super early. But as you know, that really doesn't have a lot to do with affecting your canopy flying. So like everyone, I kind of started off on a student rig that come from Don, some student 230, I think it was, because I was about 105 before I even put a rig on. Maybe it was about 100 kilos. So I was a big boy. And Don had me on that for quite some time before I got my first rig at like about 30 something jumps, and had a Sabre 2 190. I flew that for about 200 jumps before getting a Sabre 2 170. I can't remember. It's about 200 jumps for most of these canopies. I end up on like a Crossfire 2 149 at about 500 jumps, Crossfire 2 129 at about 700 or something like that, Crossfire 2 119, a Crossfire 2 109. Then at around 1,000 jumps, I end up on a Velocity 99, which I got free from Ryan Duddridge, who some of you may or may not know. He called it a free low. I'm like, why is it free? It's like, well, because most people's first velocity velo is free, so it's a free low. And it had all the characteristics of being a free low, it didn't open well and scared the crap out of you every single time you touched it. Although we got Rob McMillan on the phone, who is, Swoop Dynasty, so he's probably flown a lot of canopies that would scare the shit out of any of us on a good day. Then eventually onto a JFX 94, which was far more civilized. A Layer 86, which I still have, but it's probably at about 750, 800 jumps now. So she's not at the beginning of her life. There's a reason I fly that now, based on the wings you see that I fly after this. I have a Layer 79 as well, and a Petra 77. I actually just got another Velocity 96 from Kai, which I don't fly, but it's a nice backup wing that I'll probably do some freestyle on at some point. Given my relationship with NZA, that might not be anytime soon. A little holler out to NZA as well. Awesome wings, GLH systems for good rigging, and LNB for altimeters. They're great. So I guess, like there's a big variety of wings in there. I made it a decision pretty early on that I liked NZA wings, and that was kind of about 500 jumps. And what you notice when you fly a lot of the same manufacturer, particularly NZA wings, is they have a certain characteristic behind them. They tend to open really, really well. NZA wings tend to dive not a heap. They tend to be fairly shallow in what's called a recovery arc. And they tend to be really good on rears and toggles. So I tell you that those are things that I really like, strong rears, strong toggles, shallow dive. That's something that I've become accustomed to, so now I like. So know that you can become accustomed to any wing, and you can be comfortable with any wing, but the one thing that it requires of you is patience and time. You don't become comfortable with a wing out of nowhere. So a few varieties in there, stepping through from, some of the more standard square wings, going through semi-elliptical like the Sabres, the more fully elliptical wings like the Crossfire. If you don't know what that is, that's basically like, actually I'm going to grab my iPad so I can draw this. I'm not going to draw the shape of the wing right now. We'll come back to that later, but I reminded myself that I have it. And then bringing out more of the high performance wings that are essentially cross brace. And I will talk about what these technologies are a little bit later, getting smaller and smaller, but going from a Crossfire 2 109 to a Velocity 99 is kind of like going from your parents' 1988 Pulsar to like a pretty fast, turbocharged BMW, right? It's still not the fastest getting around, but it's still pretty economical speed, and you can have a good time with it. Eventually flying like my Petra now, which is just ballistic. And I'm even a little bit nervous about going back and flying it after this break, because 2 months is the longest time I've ever had off skydiving. So I'll talk to you about my plan for getting back in. So a few things I've had to constantly work on. Believe it or not, deployments is something I've actually really struggled with. And you might find that a little bit funny because you have to deploy every single jump. Something that I don't know we talk a lot about is about what happens after you break off from a formation. We go upstairs or downstairs, wherever we look at a GoPro footage, and you break off from a jump. And it's like, oh yeah, how was your turn? Maybe you might say that. Maybe you're not at the point where you're having those conversations with the people you're jumping with. But yeah, deployments was something I struggled with. Like a lot of fast deployments, a lot of, like line twists, just some things that you know, kind of puts a bit of gear fear there for you. So, you know, like there's been a lot of engineering I've had to learn about how deployments actually work. You know, I've kind of filmed them, I've experimented with them, and become a lot more what's the word I'm looking for? Deliberate with them. And I'll kind of show you what I've learned with deployments as well. Some of the stuff I've struggled with as well is finding a turn that works for me. When you are going through the process of learning how to fly a canopy, like anything, there's coaching involved. And when you go through that process, finding a coach that actually works for you is pretty critical, you know, at a personal level, but also kind of like how your mind works, for them being able to describe stuff, but also how you actually identify with what they're kind of teaching you. So an example would be like angry. Teaches a very rolly, very slow building progressive turn, whereas like Griggsy will teach you a very aggressive, super fast, snappy turn. And that's kind of something as well, is kind of finding what your particular lease in there is as well. So that's something I've struggled with. And something called setup as well, which I might talk a little bit about, which is how you actually take the basics of what a pattern looks like, you know, a downwind, a crosswind, an interwind setup, and then add the additional complexity about trying to be in the right place in a three-dimensional space to make sure that you can actually bring the right turn and the right amount of power to a landing as well when you start swooping. So those are some of the key things I've kind of always had to work on. You know, there's been periods where it's gone well and it kind of reverted a little bit. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I guess I want to talk a little bit before I get into all the other stuff around types of swooping techniques that exist out there. You know, I think one of the first things to touch on when we talk about getting into swooping is realizing that the fundamentals are really, really critical. When you go to any canopy course, all of your coaches should be reminding you that the fundamentals are really important. You know, like everything that you get taught around being symmetrical in a harness, about having a pattern, having a plan, accessing the toggles, all of the controls. When you go to the world champs, it's exactly the same. You know, the way we actually think about the problem, the way that we interact with the environment around us is much the same. You know, like you still have to flare evenly. You know, you still have to be aware of where you're looking. You know, all of that sort of stuff, and having a pattern and plan is really, really critical. But when you look at swooping, you realize that what we talk about is about building speed deliberately towards the ground to transfer that into horizontal momentum. And so what that ultimately looks like is when you've got your canopy up here and then you're here, you know, if you're just cruising along like that, well, the way we build speed is by changing the angle of attack. And if you can achieve this nice angle of attack where you're going straight down, well, you're going to generate a lot of power. I'm not going to get into the mechanics of like different turns and finishes and stuff like that, but at some point that power needs to be translated into that. Okay. Now, the benefit of larger degrees of rotation is it actually becomes a lot easier to access this angle of attack versus like a 90 where you do a bit of a turn and you might get a little bit sort of towards it being horizontal with the canopy, and then it has to go through the process of planing out. Whereas a much higher turn allows you to be able to access more degrees of rotation to be able to get in line with the canopy and bring more speed. So all of that is about really fundamental stuff about how wings actually work, which is pitch and roll. So like there's kind of three different ways canopies actually work and you operate with your canopy. So the first one is if your canopy is like that, the angle of attack is called the pitch. So changing the pitch. Then you've got roll, which from the front looks like this, where you actually go and rotate around the canopy like that. And you got one called yaw, which basically does this. We don't really do that under a canopy. You might create something that looks like yaw, but it's not really a thing. So basically when we turn, whether it's a toggle or a riser, what you're introducing is basically asymmetry somewhere in the system, either through the harness or by changing the shape of the wing. And what it does is introduces a pitch change and roll. And when you actually pitch and you roll at the same time, then you get this mechanism going. So the larger the degrees of rotation, the more opportunity you get to generate more power, to bring more power to the ground as it goes, right? So the types of swooping you're going to see are all going to be based around these key things, which is for the turn you're doing and the mechanic you're doing and all the other bits and pieces, are you in the right place in the sky? And all of that is built around being a good pattern, right? So got to get that first part going. So once you've got a good pattern going, you figured out what turn you want to do, what height, all the other bits and pieces. Some of the other stuff related to swooping is around approach. So the typical things you kind of see are people doing 90-degree turns where you just turn into the line of flight, 270 where you turn away from the line of flight and then come back in, a 450 where you turn into the line of flight, turn away and then finish off again, a 630 where you turn away, and you actually get 2 opportunities to see the line of flight and some of the bigger turns, 810s and things like that. But through all of that, you still need to approach that part in the sky. And so some of the key ways that people kind of approach that point is either going to be at full drive, or they're going to be at half brakes, or they're going to be at deep brakes, okay? Those are basically the 3 different potentials you have, and each single turn is going to operate slightly differently depending how you do it. I personally have gone through all of those different approach types to work out what I'm personally comfortable with. I went through the full speed approach and kind of found that that was something that I liked for a period of time, because then you would have to go do a big stab, but it didn't leave me in the best chilled headspace to approach a turn, just because there was so much going on. Eventually kind of landed back on doing half brakes, which is what Griggsy taught me thousands of jumps ago. And it's something that I brought back into my mechanic as of a few hundred jumps ago. So yeah, the approach is also a big part of that as well, and how you sort of set yourself up. So this is some of the mechanical stuff, which I'll show you on some footage. And then there's the types of turns which you spoke about. The last option that you have about modifying your turn is about the inputs you use to actually achieve those degrees of rotation. And those are going to be either through the risers or the harness. So no one at all starts a turn or manages a turn except for trying to save their life with toggles. So basically your options are to be able to initiate and maintain your particular speed of rotation through a turn using risers exclusively, harness exclusively, or some mixture of the both. I personally manage my turn by entering it with risers, initiating it, and then slowly letting them off. And I'll show you some of the mechanicing when we go through the footage. So that's a bit of a primer, which you'll actually see in some of the footage as well. So at this point, if there's no questions, I'll probably just, I'll show you what some of these things actually look like, okay? I've got some inside footage and I've got some outside footage as well. I'll just double check to see if I can find, give me 1 second. Skydiving, canopy coaching. I have got so much footage. I've actually got every jump I've ever done since 97 jumps, and all the outside I can gather as well. Okay, give me 1 sec. Okay. That's not what I wanted. Sorry. Open with QuickTime Player. Right. So this is what's called a double front. So it kind of just is a very similar thing. You still have a downwind, you still have a base leg. This is something I was doing about 200 jumps. And so you kind of make your way here. And then there's a period where you get on the brakes to try and slow down your rate of descent and chill the canopy out. And so half brakes here, and then grab the front risers, and it's literally just front risering to the ground. You've got to let off at some point. So this is very early on in the piece, and you can see I've let off really, really super early. But that is really as intro as you can get to swooping, like being closer to the ground and introducing intentional speed closer to the ground to be able to translate that into horizontal speed. It did not look impressive at all, and it's not meant to be impressive because 2 jumps ago I was shitting myself basically, trying not to die. in skydiving, right? Was not a talented canopy pilot when I first started. So that's called a double front. That's really not super exciting whatsoever. What you get after that, why is this opening with that? Sorry, I'm just gonna change my default video thing. Sarah, I'm not supposed to swear, am I? No. Bye, Sarah. Always open with, there we go. That's what we want. Cool. Okay. Right. So this is doing a 90. This is on a hop and pop. So this is at New Ngambie, or New Gambie, we called it for a while. So same thing again, is like slowing down, half brakes, half brakes. Oh wait, is this double fronts as well? Oh, this is double fronts, okay. So you can see that about 100 and something later, I'm a lot better, right? So you can see that between that first one and that one, there's a lot more speed introduced there as well. If I go and find you another 90, this is annoying. So I'm just going to open up another screen share. Okay. So this is just the beginning of doing 90s. No, that's still a double front. Anyway, I'll show you what's essentially a better 90, because that's not what I wanted. The next step after that is you do a 90-degree turn, which basically you set up along your base leg, and then there's a 90-degree turn introduced as well. So this was actually at a training camp before my first swoop comp. So you can see, obviously a little bit more on. Oh, that was actually a really bad 90. Actually, that's why I put it in there, because I almost hit the fence. That is not the one I wanted to show you, but that was a bit of a moment as well. That's actually before my first comp where I almost hit a fence. So that was a good one. But that's a 90. Okay, is that a 90? Yeah, that's a 90, thank God. Okay, let's show you a 90. That isn't about me almost hitting a fence. So this is quite early on in the piece. So planing out nice and high. And, oh wait, you can't see that, can you? I'll show that again, hold on. So this is a 90. Nothing that fancy. So you can see playing out nice and high, nothing scary, it's all good. Okay. So let me walk you through a little bit what's happened up to this point. So be getting a lot more serious about free flying, buying all the gear, buying all the canopy, all of that sort of stuff. And then realizing, oh, okay, so swooping's pretty cool. Okay, quite like it, a little bit more speed, a little bit of the other stuff. Then from there, I showed you that 90 where I almost hit a fence. It doesn't actually look all that fancy when you look at what a 90 when you first start doing it from the side. I have it somewhere. Here we go. Okay. QuickTime Player. So this is what it looks like. So this is my first swoop comp ever at the Kapow Cup. I think I came in second or something like that in intermediate, which there was only one category anyway. But yeah, nothing special there either. And it's not meant to look that special because it's a very gradual thing. It kind of requires you to have a lot of patience to kind of go through all of the steps. So that was sort of around 500 jumps. And then you find yourself going, okay, well, what more can I do with this? And then from here, I'll introduce that. And this is the first 270-degree turn I ever did. This was on a Crossfire 2 109. So really fast, super high. Yeah, scared the hell out of me. I remember thinking I was going to die the whole time. And yeah, enough time to do more rotation, sachet back in. So nothing exciting. But at the time, very, very, very exciting. And that's kind of the point, is that as you start to move away from 90-degree turns where you can look at where you're going to finish the whole time, and move to a 270-degree turn where you have to look away from where you're going to land, that becomes a little bit more exciting, actually quite a lot more exciting. It's kind of at that point I was actually starting to realize, oh, I really, really, really like swooping. Okay, cool. So maybe I want to get a cross brace canopy. And so it was about 100 jumps later, I got my first cross brace, which was that velocity. And I'll show you the difference there. So that first turn, which was not that special, to this is my first cross brace canopy. So it does a lot more of everything. Oh wait, that was a 90-degree turn. 1043. Sorry, let me find the right one for you. It's somewhere around here. Anyway, I haven't got that jump going in front of me. But that was a complete nightmare, that canopy. It did not open well at all. I actually made a video called FU Velocity just because it would never open up head on. Actually, I can show you. Where is that? Somewhere around here. Okay. So this is basically the quality of the openings I got out of that particular canopy. Yeah, exciting all the time. And I actually yell FU Velocity as I go along as well. I hated that canopy, but it was a good introduction into cross brace canopies and kind of swooping. A little while later, I got my first JFX, brand new from NZA. And I'll just bring that up. And yeah, this thing was awesome, absolutely awesome. So you can see the first jump I ever did on these canopies, I thought, historically speaking, when I did those jumps, I would be doing 270-degree turns. But as it turns out, every single time I did a jump on those new canopies, I actually did a 90, which is pretty good of me. And I guess that's something I kind of want to talk a little bit about, is as you introduce new canopies into your regimen, you kind of want to do something that you're super familiar with. when I do a new canopy now, I'll actually revert back to a more simplistic turn to actually get more familiar with it. But yeah, so that JFX actually really performed really well, and that was something that I took to nationals in 2018, and got some good performance out of. Let me bring up another video. Okay, let's bring this up. So this canopy was very, very, very capable. Opened really well, lots of performance, good for my size. I did 550 jumps on this wing and got to know it incredibly well. And it took me through a whole bunch of skydiving. So lots of nice power. Nice distance. Stop. So that is at 1,070 jumps. So only about 500 jumps before I started doing 90. So within about 500 jumps, I'd gone from learning to a 90 to actually going to nationals and doing some swooping and getting some good performance out of it, which was pretty cool, which is really cool actually. I followed that for a little bit, and yeah, did lots and lots of jumps on it. Traveled around the world with it, swooped a whole bunch of different places with it, and then at about 1,600 jumps, I got my my first layer, and it's a vastly different wing to the other one. So this is a 270-degree turn on that wing. So a nice long time to look at it, look at the ground, chill out. Happy days. And that's Clayton sharing the moment with me. I actually bought that canopy from Clayton, which was really cool to actually do that jump with him. But I will show you the opening as well, actually. The openings of the layer are particularly good, but you'll kind of see that a little bit off-heading, which is fine. But when I was deploying, you'll just notice I'm actually looking at the ground a fair bit, and I'm going to come back to that because this is something I've been doing or used to do quite a lot. So got that first layer 86 at 1,600 jumps, and really loved it. And then at about 1,700 jumps, I started doing my first 450s. So I'll bring that up. So with this turn, you turn towards where you're trying to end up. So you actually need to set this turn back a lot more time in the rotation. So it's a lot easier to get it wrong, but you can also generate a lot more speed as well. So for a first crack, yeah, I was happy with that. I was really happy with that. And in terms of turns, that's actually the turn that I still fly with now. So I've actually spent about 500 jumps trying to improve that turn. So in terms of what you'll actually do as you go along, you might introduce more, you might not introduce more, but for me, that's something I've been able to actually be comfortable with through a whole bunch of swooping. From there, I got my layer 79, which I'll bring up now. Oops, sorry, just one sec. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. And going from 86 to 79 square feet, this thing was very different. Very different. A lot more performant. Expected a lot more out of me in terms of the harness. Heaps more power out of the risers and toggles. The thing about downsizing this pink canopy. I love it. Love it. The thing about downsizing is that when you go down, say 10% as an example, it's not just 10% more performant. It's probably more like 15, potentially 20% more performance. So that's really something to be mindful of, is that the numbers don't just check out, you know, like linearly. I actually have a chop, which I'll show you a little bit later, but I have some footage of my Petra. And this is the wing that I fly now. Okay. And sorry, just one moment. Distance. I think distance. Okay. So we had the Kapow Cup before the world basically came to a grinding halt, and that was the last time I flew my Petra, and I miss flying her. So that was at the Kapow Cup. And this is the Victorian State Swoop meet that we've got. Now, I don't necessarily want to go into all of the difference between all of the wings and all the turns and all the setup and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, only a few minutes ago, I was showing you double fronts coming into land, and then obviously, you know, like doing 450s on a Petra. It's taken me 7 years to be able to show you what that progression looks like in a few minutes on video. But I feel pretty stoked to actually have access to all the footage to kind of show you what that stuff looks like. It may not be super obvious, but I guess the point is that the journey is long. The journey is super progressive, and you know, taking your time with it is something that you're going to have to do. Kind of rushing doesn't really get you anywhere of any substance. So that's kind of some of the video that I wanted to go through. Does anybody have any questions or anything? Can we just keep going, Sarah? Yeah?
Yep, you can keep going. Good.
Nice. Cool. So yeah, I guess, yeah, starting off, getting into free flying, realizing, hey, I want to do more with the canopy. Trying to work out how the hell you get into doing more with the canopy, just doing those double fronts, throwing a few 90s along the way, quite a lot of 90s actually, sort of like 700 90s, which is, you know, for some people, like, why'd you do so many? And the only answer I can give them is, did it slow me down? And I think the answer is no. Slow you down, you know, relative to what? You know, I don't think it was an impediment. In fact, I thought it was really good. It taught me about how to actually handle a canopy without introducing all the other scary bits that come along with it. And then picking up a 270 along the way and realizing, oh man, this is really, really good. Introducing more cool wings, and then throwing more rotation and adding cooler wings along the way. That's kind of basically the process. Now, what is not obvious through all that is the 14 different canopy coach events that I've gone to along the way, ranging from anywhere from 2 or no jumps. Well, I actually don't count those. The 2 jumps, like in a weather type weekend for canopy coaching, all the way through to like 20 or 30 coach jumps for a nationals, as an example. So I've gone through my logbook, and it would appear that about 1 of every 10 or 12 jumps I've done has been a coach canopy jump, which is good, which is really, really, really good. Because, like, you know, getting coaching is one of the critical things, because you really can't see it yourself. I showed you a lot of inside footage. I have a lot of outside footage, which I can probably show a little bit later, but it's really important to go and seek access from those coaches. You really don't want to just go and be figuring it out on your own, because even if I went and did these things for the first time, I really made sure to do it in the right environment. If I had access to canopy coaching to try it for the first time, that would be preferable. And a lot of the times I actually did it for the first time under canopy coaching. Sometimes I did not. If I could go back and do everything under everything I did new, including changing canopies, under the tutelage of a canopy coach, I would elect for that. Would I do anything different? It's kind of hard to say. I don't know if I would, but in practice, if someone said, hey, how would you suggest I go and introduce a new turn or a new canopy? I'd say go get canopy coaching and doing it. There's no doubt that is the best way to do it. More feedback, safer and better experience around you, because the reality is that you don't really know what you don't know. And, swooping is about deliberately introducing more risk for more reward. Okay. So that's some of the video. I've still got heaps more good video to show you. So not just boring landing at the drop zone, because you're probably just like, that's not that good. And you're right, it's not that good. The good stuff is good, and I have the good stuff to show. I'm saving it for last. But yeah, getting into swooping and staying motivated. So let me start by saying you don't have to get into swooping. You don't have to, ever. You don't ever have to touch the front risers. The best skydive is one you walk away from 100% of the time, every time. If you don't walk away from it because you had an injury, that sucks. If you don't walk away from it because you're dead, even worse. It can be quite scary, even when you know what you're doing. Like one of those things that we talk about is, the shaking hands, like, oh, my hands are shaking. Just because we all get used to it very, very, very easily. And that's not itself not a problem, because, confidence and experience are really, really vital for pushing and progressing ahead. But you don't want to be in a point where you're either not taking it seriously or not understanding what's actually happening around you. So yeah, getting into swooping, you don't have to, but if you want to, this is some of the advice that I kind of have for you. Coaching is super important. I'm just going to keep saying that coaching is super important. I've recently become a canopy coach myself, but I only teach the basics. I don't teach swooping at the moment because I still need to learn the fundamentals about how to communicate with people. I've done a lot of free fly coaching, and I've coached possibly hundreds, I'm not sure, coached a lot of people in free flying, and it's remarkably similar how to actually motivate people. The difference is people are willing to experiment and get things wrong when it comes to free fly coaching, but experimenting and getting it wrong with swooping is not good, because you don't have any options. The only currency we have in the sky is altitude, and you swap that every single time you go and do swooping for power. Hey, Alex. Hey, man. I see you. So yeah, coaching is really super important. I know a lot of the names here are Victoria. So, you don't really have a lot of options when it comes to high performance canopy coaching. I'm working on that to get my rating. It's going to take a little bit of time, but at the moment you've got access to Griggsy, and Robbie comes down from time to time, Angry comes down from time to time. But if you're getting into swooping, then coaching is really important. Even if you're not getting into swooping, coaching. Like I said, some of the stuff I did under the guidance of a canopy coach, some I did not. The early stuff was 100% always under a canopy coach. Towards the end, as I felt a little bit more comfortable to dissect and debrief myself and figure stuff out and also get some information, I felt more comfortable to introduce those things. But the best situation is to be doing under the guise of a canopy coach. Getting into swooping is kind of like when is the right time? People often ask me, like, when is the right time? The honest answer is there's really no right time. It's kind of when you want to do it. I see a lot of newer jumpers, I should say, getting into swooping because they feel like they have to, because, there's been a lot more of a focus on it. Years ago it was about being on the big free fly jump and stuff like that. I see a lot more tunnel instructors and free flyers getting way more excited about canopy coaching. I think that's kind of rubbing off on jumpers as well, particularly free flyers who are incredibly good in the sky because of tunnel or ability, whatever the case may be. Are thinking, hey, maybe I should do a 90, maybe I should do a 270. Like it's a cool thing to do. I get to land in the lane. I get to do it. You don't have to, but if you want to, there's really no right time. There's definitely some wrong times to do it, like being a student, as an example, is obviously no swooping. Doing it on student gear, also no swooping. Doing it on gear that's just actually flat out inappropriate for it as well, like the way your risers are set up. I'm not even going to say canopy size, because, you can swoop a Sabre 230. You can. Is it going to be a good one? Might not be the best, but some of the best swoopers on the planet can probably swoop the hell out of it. So really the right time is kind of when you feel like you have enough of an understanding about what's going on about you and what motivates you, and that you're prepared to look down the barrel of what that risk versus reward looks like. So definitely avoid pressure. Definitely avoid pressure. Even if it comes from yourself, no one around you should be pressuring you to get into swooping. And if they are, tell them to get lost. And if you can't, ask someone else to tell them to get lost, because they're your legs. Okay. How to tell if it's for you? The honest answer is you got to do it to know if it's for you. Because I remember the first time I saw someone do a big swoop at Ngambie in like 2013, and I saw them coming in and rotating and diving towards the ground. I said, "Oh, I'm about to see someone die. Holy hell!" And I remember saying to the person next to me and saying, "There's no way you'll catch me doing that. That's not for me. I'm here to do wingsuiting next to cliffs. Nah, man, not me." Never done a base jump, never done a wingsuit next to a cliff, have swooped a lot. So, you know, the stories we tell ourselves, you're not going to know if it's for you until you do it. But you can do it safely as long as it's far away from the ground, right? You can, with a coach. With a coach, remember, with a coach. Don't just steal the first part. So yeah, you know, if you're wondering whether it's for you, I don't think there is a minimum jump number. I wouldn't be looking to introduce it any earlier than maybe 100 jumps, although I think probably you might find 200 jumps as an example, right? But I'm talking about trying it up at altitude as an example. Towards the ground, I'm not going to give you a number because I don't want anyone to take that and go, it's time for me to start swooping, right? But trying these things at altitude, as long as you're altitude, probably not a big deal. Everyone's got different motivations as well. I can tell you what motivates me, and what motivated me initially was, you know, free flying was going really well. I was having a good time. Was really enjoying what's going on there. But there was this other 2 minutes in the 3-minute skydive that I was like, this is not as fun as it could be. And that was kind of one of the first things that motivated me, is like, I wonder what's going on there. But staying in swooping, there's going to be some moments where you're like, it's frustrating because it's not working out like you expect it to be. You want to be doing a bigger rotation. You want to be flying a smaller wing, all of that stuff. The only thing that kind of keeps you going are the incremental rewards as you go along. And that's kind of a really important part, is understand what motivates you. And my motivation is just the little things, is like, oh, that was a little bit more powerful. Oh, that was a little bit longer. Oh, that was, you know, a little bit more deliberate. All of that sort of stuff. There's a whole psychology in skydiving, and you're probably hearing it from Jason, you're hearing it from Tane, you're hearing it from Andrew, you're hearing it from me. You'll probably find that swoopers are a pretty different bunch. I think that swoopers are a lot more like the wingsuiters when it comes to, I'm talking about performance competition swooping, by the way, as opposed to just drop zone swooping. Because drop zone swooping is just go have a good time, stay safe. But competition swooping it's very calculated. It's very focused on numbers. You know, you've got zone accuracy, you've got speed, and you've got distance. And the only way you can interface with that is by bringing consistency. And the only way you can be consistent is by actually understanding what it is that you're doing. And so the motivation of understanding can for me be something that really keeps me interested as well, is like, oh, 100 meters, oh, 120 meters, oh, 140 meters. And chasing those numbers is a big one. And it's not like, oh, I just want to do more distance. Well, no, what do you have to do more distance? So for me, one of the key things about motivation is understanding, like it was with free flying, and kind of realizing those two things was pretty important. Because with free flying towards, you know, like I still free fly a lot, but in the real thick of the free flying career for me, yeah, understanding that I really just wanted to understand how it worked was a big motivation. I've got some stuff on how swooping actually works and how wings work. I'll probably just kind of really dance through that really quickly. I mean, I talked a little bit about how swooping works. The idea is that you've got a wing here and you sit underneath it. Like swooping, the idea is that you accelerate towards the ground by pitch, or introducing pitch and roll, to introduce more vertical speed that you subsequently translate into horizontal speed. That is the core of it. By introducing pitch and roll, that's kind of the key mechanics of it. There's a little bit more that gets involved with like your equipment and body position and stuff like that. I don't necessarily want to know if I want to go into that in great detail, but you'll probably see that when you see some serious swooping going on. You see people with their chest straps off, you see them with the slider gone, you see them with the D-bag gone, the pilot chute gone, all that sort of stuff. All of these things absolutely all contribute to it, but one of the key games in swooping, whilst introducing more speed, is about reducing drag as well. So that's one of the key things that we try to do as well. Tight clothing, removing deployment systems that don't actually assist with the process of actually flying. And body position is actually a massive one as well. If you're flying, you know, like with your arms out and your legs out and stuff like that, all of that is introducing drag. And that's one of the key things we try to reduce along the way as well. I might come back to that if there's a little bit more time, because I actually want to make sure we've got time for the Q&A. How do the wings roughly work? I mean, so we've got these shapes, and I think I can actually draw it. I saw a whiteboard thing. Here we go, whiteboard. Nice. Okay, cool. So you've got these nice. Whoa, is there a square? Ooh. Draw. Yeah, square. So this is a nice boring canopy. Sarah, can you nod if you can see the square? You can? Cool. That's a square canopy, right? Might be 7-cell, might be 9-cell. Then you actually have, ooh, no. Okay, I'm gonna do this by hand. Good luck, everyone. Then you've got something that's a little bit more elliptical, like not heaps, just a little bit of those rounded edges there. Then you've got something which is fully elliptical, so it introduces the shape out the back, like that. But it's still mostly square. Then you move towards these really hyper style wings, like the layers and the petras, which tend to be very short and narrow along this particular edge. And they tend to do this, okay? Ooh, yuck. Man. Okay. The characteristics of this is basically, this one doesn't roll very well, but it deploys really well. It's really docile. We like that, okay? Those are the characteristics we like. Opens head on, doesn't turn a lot. Something that's semi-elliptical will actually roll and therefore pitch a little bit more fun, but they still open okay. These are more your sabers and things like that. Then you've got your fully elliptical, where they actually are rounded across both corners on both sides. These are things like your crossfires and your katanas. And to a degree as well, your JFXs and stuff like that. And then you move to this style of wing, which is more your layers, your Valkyries, your Petras, and your Peregrines. And the characteristics of these is that you see they're missing all of this part of the wing here. This is introducing something that's a characteristic of the wing that's about being dynamically unstable. So it's always looking to roll. And by rolling, then it basically changes the pitch. That's one of the key things that allows to generate a lot of speed in a swoop as well. Nice. So that's kind of some of the key stuff. The other things that relate to wings as well is like kind of the technology related to porting, which is the hole at the front on the nose, and how that actually affects the amount of pressurization you get inside of a wing. The amount of cells, you got 7 cells and 9 cells. You've got these tri-cells as well, these cross bracings, which provide more rigidity in the wing to be able to stay in a dive a little bit more as well. And then you've got some technology in terms of the fabric you use, whether it's ZP or sail. This is a whole 30-minute, 1 hour, 2 hour discussion. So I don't necessarily want to get into that too much, but I've kind of gone through this really lightly to get to some of the other stuff, which is a little bit more compelling. But yeah, there's a great amount of technology going on in wings at the moment. And the future for the wings in the next few years is going to look absolutely awesome. There's some pretty big changes happening in harnesses as well. You might see that there's these paraglider style harnesses. The UPT one is called the Mutant as an example. I think Javelin's working one, and I know there's a few others going around as well. You'll excuse me, I can't remember what they were. But the whole idea is about, it works with the center of gravity for the wing, it works with how much presentation, it works with body position, all of that stuff. So there's heaps going on in that space as well. So watch this space, and we can come back to it if there's a little bit of time at the end of this chat. I wanted to talk about some malfunctions, actually. So I've had 4, and 3 of the 4 were because of body position, as it was. Actually, I will show them to you. So this is number 1. So this was like 2nd jump at my first funny farm. Great. Awesome. Okay, cool. Spun off my back, spinning line twist. That is, no, we're not going to fix that one. Bump, bump. See ya. Cool, happy days. Spun off my back. The bag spun off my back, and I was just like, oh, what's going on there? This was at a Aussie vertical record training camp in Barwon Heads. Beautiful and green. Again, spun off my back. Same story. You get like a moment to go, okay, I know what direction. Oh, I got it wrong. Go wrong direction with the spin, and it just carries away from you. And you know, these cross brace canopies, they're pretty gnarly. And we love a reserve, love a good reserve. And that sort of happened at like early 1,000 jumps. And then it didn't happen till maybe 800 jumps later or thereabouts. My next one, which was on the layer 79. Sarah was there for this jump. You know this one. This is actually a tension knot, which is something that happens on the layers as well.
This was awful to see from above.
Turns pretty quickly, and line twists. Yeah, that's because I have a sky hook on that canopy. So as you're spinning on your back, that introduces, because it's a main assisted reserve deployment system, yeah, introduces twist to the reserve as well. It's pretty common. What I learned from that jump, and actually no, the jump after that is, I only use my sky hook when I do free fall jumps, but when I do hop and pops, I don't use it, just because I tend to have more altitude, more space around me and stuff like that. And yeah, it's no good. This one is the worst malfunction I've ever had. It's not good. So this was training at Nationals last year, layer 79 as well. Spun off my back again. Okay. And slow build up, and then it's just going. I'm at about 8,000 feet I've actually exited from, so I'm spending a lot of time with this trying to figure out what's going on. And nah, boom. And a lot of turns on that reserve. And then spinning line twists on your reserve. The good life. Yeah. So what it turned out is it took me a few hundred jumps to really, after all of this went down, and kind of realize what happened. As it turns out, I was de-arched, and I have been de-arched for a lot of my deployments as well. And I kind of figured that out because of some of the cues I was using, tracking away, doing a hop and pop opening, whatever the case may be. As it turns out, I was using my eyes to look up at the horizon there, but my face was pointing at the ground, and it was allowing me to kind of de-arch a little bit. So one part of the problem was about looking up. So I started introducing looking up a lot more, like as far as I could. The other one I realized is actually when I was deploying out the side like that, rather than up here. And so that was introducing a little bit of a sideways movement. So I was de-arched, side sliding, and guess what? You know, like the bag was actually coming out to the side a little bit and rotating as we went along. And after I started to realize that, I kind of explained to a few people what's going on. It seems to be helping them. But from there, the openings now that I get very consistently. And, you know, I might get 5 degrees of rotation on my opening. They tend to look all like this now. And you'll see the difference in footage when I actually touch the handle. What you see now, you see sky, a lot of sky, whereas before it was almost all the ground. So these openings now are just on heading. And so that was actually really a really important part to sort of overcome as well, because as you're sort of coming up your canopy progression and you get to eventually you're like, I want to buy a Petra, and you're like, I still don't know how to deploy a canopy. Is a pretty scary thing to kind of face into. So I had to really get on top of that and engineer it. So that was a real moment as well. On top of those malfunctions, there were three, I'm going to call them moments, okay? Three real danger zone moments. The first one is where I almost killed someone, and myself as well. So this was at Fly in 2016, I think it was. I'm going to walk you through the landing in full speed, and then I'll show it to you in slow. So this is just doing a 90, okay? So looks good, looks good, looks good, looks good. Looks good. Some of you probably didn't even see the canopy, did you? No? Okay, let me wind that back for you. Okay, so I'm coming in. You can see in the bottom left of the screen, you can see a little canopy down there. Can you see it? Yeah. So I'm swooping and he's still there. And then I turn. Now you can see him right there. Right there. My shadow actually collides with his. You can see it on the ground, and you can see everything going on there. So I almost killed him and myself. Super close, super close. When I got to the ground, I realized that was close. I didn't see him. I didn't see him at all. This was at a boogie in California. Just so focused on landing. So swooping with no one around you is pretty okay. Swooping with people around you, you better keep your eyes. What did I learn from that? It was 100% my fault. Because coming into land, he was, whilst he was behind a little bit, and he's sort of in a little bit of a blind spot, I was actually above, right? I think it was behind. Was it behind the footage? Anyway, so I was above him, so I should have seen it, right? And even when I'm about to start my turn, I'm so focused because I'm looking over here, okay? Not good, not good at all. And so then I don't realize it until it's too late that I haven't really noticed that. So that was something that really, really affected me and my skydiving and swooping and stuff. I became very conservative for a period of time. And so as a result, trying to spot what's happening in the environment around me was really, really, really important. It doesn't happen so much in competition swooping and stuff like that because you've got plenty of room around you, but day-to-day swooping, which is where you probably do a lot of your swooping, if you know the reality, super, super dangerous if you're not paying attention to what's happening around you. So yeah, key lesson learned there as well. The other two were hitting the pond at farm. And for a different reason, for the other swoop that I showed you, it's because I didn't see him. In this one, I saw him the whole time, and that was the problem. So you can actually see a canopy up here. This is one of the Convery brothers. I'm on my JFX 94, and he's doing a turn on his leg. He's doing a much larger turn, 450 or something like that, I think. Maybe a 630, it doesn't really matter. But he's above, and I'm below. And I'm really focused on doing this swoop across the pond. I want to get that drag, focus, focus, focus. He's got to go. And so I've gone past my altitude for where I want to turn. And yeah, I'm just blowing through. I'm like, yeah, I'll just do a quicker turn. I'll just do a quicker turn. And bear in mind, I want to show you here as well. Down here, all these outs on the side, outs everywhere. Outs absolutely everywhere. And so he's gone and done that turn now. He's now starting to descend here. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm not checking my altitude that much. I'm checking it a little bit. I know I'm a little bit lower, so I'm like, I'll just do it a bit quicker. I'm going to go. I'm going to get this fucking swoop. I am going to get this swoop. And there is the water. Yeah, okay, bang. Wasn't a big hit, but still enough to tear the inside of my right MCL and tear one of the hamstrings in my left leg, which I still carry. And when I massage that leg, I can actually feel part of the hamstring still missing, and that right knee is still dodgy. So yeah, that was one of the big hits as well. To sync. Where is the other one? Bum, bum, bum. World CP. Skydiving, swooping. Okay. Let me see if I've got the right footage. 1 second. No, that's not it. So this one was my last round at in South Africa. It was a speed round, and it was hot. It was a long comp, and I was just taking a few shortcuts in my mental rehearsal. And this drop zone very hard to swoop at, but you know, it is what it is. I didn't know what the problem was until much later, and then I figured out what was going on. So as it turns out, I've actually hit a bollard. So coming in, still got a lot of heat on. I'm not going to get into the mechanics of why this actually happened, but I basically bounced off the pond with my hip here, and it's unloaded the harness, and the canopy is being thrown off to the side, and the canopy subsequently hit that bollard right there, and I've gone for a tumble. I've been lucky that I contacted the water before the ground. I just rolled out and slid, and everybody's coming to run like, are you okay? And first thing I did was I put up my hand. I'm like, I'm okay, and got a cheer. But you know, a real moment that I've had to sort of carry through and think about how would I do that slightly different for comp next time. So no answer there, but we'll get to the answer for that one later. I've got some real highlight moments. I'll probably just show you a few of them though, just to kind of make you realize that actually swooping is not just me just going, oh, it's real dangerous, you shouldn't do it. There's actually some really cool moments as well. So I feel pretty cool that I can actually show you all these jumps. So jumping at the Palm in Dubai is pretty cool, hey? Like really cool. So, you know, when you see palm jumps, actually this is not a good jump to show. When you jump at the palm, they're always showing you like all this mad footage and stuff, but actually kind of seeing what's happening around you, like just on a normal jump, it's incredible. Like you see the palm over in the distance over there, you see the buildings and stuff, and you're just descending, and these buildings are just coming out of the earth. You know, like you just do a turn and they just appear to rise up at you. Like it's a real privilege to fly at the Palm, actually. I don't know how much longer we'll be able to do it, but yeah, it's just incredible. Like all this huge vista of buildings all around you. Like in Australia, we don't really have anything like this. You know, the challenge of actually landing on the Palm itself is not such a super big deal, potentially depending on your level, but you know, looking down and looking around, looking out to the side and seeing in line with you know, with buildings is actually amazing, absolutely amazing. That in itself was pretty cool, but not the most picturesque. Something that you might put yourself in a position to do is this one, and that's jumping at the K. And actually swooping the K is a real pleasure. Like, look at this thing. It's just beautiful. you know, if you can't fly a canopy competently, you can't jump there, period. So whether you're swooping or not, like this is one of the things that being competent with the canopy will allow you to do and access. Not a super exciting swoop, but that's not the point. It's like a wing is something that gets you down from a plane safely that you can land accurately on the ground. And like, are you kidding? We get to go and land on this with our mates. Like, do you need any more incentive to actually be okay with a canopy? You don't have to swoop it. Like, you land it however you like, but what an experience that is, right? That is one of the best jumps I've ever done. And, you know, like the ability to actually swoop on that, awesome. I look forward to go back and actually doing a big swoop onto that thing. That'd be absolutely awesome. And then there's some other really cool moments I've had as well, you know, like doing some good drags and stuff like that. But I need to find the right jump. Sorry, just 1 second. We've got a lot of footage here. Sarah, sing a song or something. I'm struggling to find this jump.
I'm definitely not singing a song.
Sing a song. I'm going to show you something else. It's somewhere else. So this is a little trip I had to Europe, but let's bring this up. Okay. So when you go to Angle Week in Sweden, it goes to jump at a place called in Nasinga, and you jump with some legends, but you jump in one of the most beautiful places on earth. And then you have this place called Costa Island where you go and land, and yeah, you just land down there on the sand down there. And then there's a nice hotel that you over here that you get to have some drinks on and catch the ferry back to the drop zone. Incredible. And this has to be one of my favorite swoops of all time. Like, it was so beautiful. Landing next to some trees and some grass and dragging water and all of that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, that's got to be one of the standout moments. And you realize, actually, you haven't really kind of pointed out that comp's been the big highlight for kind of swooping. And it's because it's not, you know, competition is something that's kind of happened as a result of having a good time and doing these cool things around the world with cool people as well. And so, yeah, I guess I love competition, but it's never been the thing that kind of lit the fire in my belly as it was. So yeah, swooping is awesome. Absolutely awesome. I've got a few more topics I can cover, but I think maybe in the interest of time, maybe I might sort of just kind of leave it there. Unless there's any other topics you guys might want to hear or see. Cool. Yeah, long story short, swooping's awesome. Stay safe, get coaching. If you want to compete, you can compete. You don't have to compete. It might be somewhere you go. It's something that I enjoy doing, but it's not the highlight of my swooping career by any means. Like, the good times with mates is 100% way better. It just happens to be that you do swooping along the way. Yeah. Cool. Sarah? You're still muted, mate.
Oh, thank you. I should get the hang of this by now, but I haven't. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions that I already have down, and then I'll let other people ask if they have any. If not, you can write in the chat box. So what's the biggest issue you see with canopy progression today?
It's too fast. It's absolutely too fast. We've got Robbie on the call, who is like OG swooper, and you know, they took their time. They took thousands of jumps to go through like a couple of canopies, and you know, like, to figure it out, because you kind of had to. We're in a position now with my generation, and then the younger generation. It just gets faster and faster and faster. Expectations get bigger. people want to be cooler. I get it. But, you know, like swooping is not something that you can just take shortcuts on. Maybe you're ready for it quicker than others. You know, there's people like Angus Sellan as an example. You know, put him under a garbage bag and he'd swoop it. Like, just a master with the wing. Well, not everyone's an Angus Sellan. I'm certainly not. And yeah, I think the real problem is just going too fast. You know, like there's no magic number for how many jumps is enough for a wing, but there's certainly some things that you should expect to do before thinking about changing a wing as an example. Because if you can't land your wing today, downwind, off, drop zone, shouldn't be changing. And there's a few people who have probably done that a few times where they haven't been able to tick that box and are on a wing that they're not comfortable to land, even under good conditions into wind. So yeah, slowing down for sure.
And you touched on a tiny bit about competition, but is there anything that you do, your mindset in competition, like that you think about? Are you doing visualizations? If there is weather days, how do you prepare for competition when you can't actually jump?
Yeah, that's actually really important. I realized when I did my first 2 national comps in Australia, I was super relaxed about the whole thing because I didn't have any expectation of myself. And suddenly I went to my first World Cup, I should say, and had a monumental amount of expectation and was very focused on results, very focused on what other people were doing, and subsequently flew the worst comp I've ever flown, period, right? Obviously come home safe, so good competition in that sense, right? And still went to World Cup, so really good experience. Yeah, for sure, noted. But I got too focused on outcome and not a process. And, you know, I've had to try and get my headspace in the right place for the nationals, which didn't take place, but the worlds which might take place, we'll see. And that's kind of realizing how it is that I approach these things. And that's thinking about the process. And it's something I've actually talked a lot with Jason Dodunsky about. I actually really enjoy having a process, refining the process, and just working hard on the process, having a good time. And if outcomes come along with it, then that's just incidental. When my mindset flips to think about the outcomes, it's kind of like saying, I want to eat this dinner without having cooked it. You know what I mean? Switching back gears to thinking about cooking the meal before eating it has been absolutely critical. The whole game on weather days and things like that, it's just patience. That's really just the quality of being an adult and being mature and understanding your level of expectation. You carry too much expectation, you're always going to be disappointed, right? Carry no expectation and you going to ask yourself, why am I doing these things? So there is a balance there for sure. But yeah, some of the key stuff I've personally learned about my motivation, my headspace is about not thinking about an outcome. Because you probably skipped a few steps along the way.
And talking about steps, just so people who are watching this or here now are thinking about getting into swooping, can you talk about how long, like it didn't just obviously happen over you for night, you've touched on how many like coaching events you went, how many wings you've gone through. How long did it take for you to get from where you are now to when you started?
About 2,200 jumps is the answer, but I first started getting canopy coaching at about 100 jumps from Griggsy, and then started touching rises at about 200 jumps, I think it was. Doing double fronts for about 300 jumps, 90s for about 500 jumps, 270s for about 700 jumps, and then the rest have all been 450s. Each wing has been somewhere between, sometimes it's been as little as 70 jumps for moving, but that's because I've moved like 3 square feet as an example. Some of the larger changes have been around 550 to 250 jumps. On average, 250 jumps has been a point where I've gone about a line set. Have I done enough jumps to think about this? Could I have done more on them? Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Could I have done more? Would it have helped? Probably. Did it negatively affect me? It's kind of hard to say without going back and running an experiment, which I won't be able to do. The best advice I can give to people is if your canopy coach is going, why are you still flying that wing? That's probably a good sign. If you don't have a canopy coach, you should get one because that's probably a missing part of the formula. Your mate saying you're doing great is awesome. It's kind of like my mum saying, oh, you're really special. It's like, cool. Thanks, mum. Yeah, so there's really no fine line, but the answer will be if you appear to be comfortable, consistent, and can tick all those boxes, that's probably a good start. But yeah, seeking advice from experienced and knowledgeable people, really critical.
Awesome. Me and Alex have both kind of touched on the same question. She's asked this in the chat box, but she said, not doing any generalization here, but there's expectations between boys and girls are not the same. They're different. Boys are all about small wings, which is something I haven't seen that much on girls' mindsets. What's your opinion between girls and boys' progression? And did you notice a huge difference in mindset between the two?
That's an interesting one. I think something I've noticed in doing a lot of coaching between free fly and canopy is everyone, regardless of their gender, is hard on themselves. Full stop. Okay, so this is not a gender discussion. There's maybe some characteristics about gender that probably come at play, like, and please no social justice warriors or gender people pull me up if I don't get things perfectly right here. You know, there's probably some physiological differences between us, like 34 years of testosterone in my body has produced a certain, you know, a mental paradigm, a physiology, a set of impulses that are probably different to a lady who's had 34 years of not as much testosterone. I think what that equates to, practically speaking, is that my anecdotal thoughts is I think men tend to go, nah, it'll be fine. We tend to just start evaluating and go, nah, she'll be right. I think that that women typically, and this is typically not all the case, I think they tend to be a lot more thoughtful. I think they tend to consider the repercussion a little bit further. I think that's well outside of skydiving as well. I think that's a pretty reasonable anecdote to sort of draw, right? You obviously have certain individuals like Cornelia Mihai is a weapon. Does not matter whether she's a lady or a man or whatever the case may be. That person is a weapon, full stop, just approaches doggedly. But that's at one end of the spectrum, right? So in terms of why don't you see a lot of hardcore swoopers who are women? Well, I think we have to look at the spread of men and women in skydiving in general and realize it's already not skewed there. How long people stay in the sport, you know, my position as an APF board director, you know, this is something we look at is, you know, like what is the mix of people in the sport? You know, Jules does a lot with that as well. What is the motivations? How do we support people? We have obviously women in adventure sport, all of these initiatives to go, there appears to be some inequality between the genders to start with. Are we working on the same playing ground, right? But when it comes down to canopy progression, I think because it's closer to the ground and it has more repercussions, I think females tend to think it through a lot more than men, which is more reflection on men than it is on women, to be honest. I think that we just go, yeah, right? Kind of fact. Does that really answer the question? Because I don't think there's an empirical answer for that.
No, I think it answers the question. Like I personally am, we both know, I overthink everything in skydiving. So my progression is like, I'm always told by coaches to attack a bit more rather than to back off or just like, so I think that is, and plus it does change as well for females, for me anyway, that you do weigh a lot less, like that comes into play, I think, a bit.
I didn't touch on that. Typically, and I do say typically, females tend to weigh less, right? So we haven't talked about wing loading or anything like that. That's obviously a part. Yeah, I think Robbie's right. Women have a better survival instinct in his opinion. Yeah, that's probably right. But when we talk about wing loading, we have a combination of wing size to body weight. And typically females tend to weigh less. Now, in order to get more performance out of a parachute, you typically have to bring more weight to the discussion, right? But then there's an envelope where it doesn't make sense anymore, so you have to reduce the size of the wing. Now, for a woman to get a 1.0 in a wing, you have to bring the wing typically smaller than a man has to, right? Often you find anecdotally men tend to already hit that 1.0 envelope when they're on their student wings, as an example, whereas like, you know, ladies might potentially have to downsize a number of times to get to that point.
I'm one now at like 800 jumps.
There you go. Yeah, so I fly at 3 something, I think. And so, yeah, I think that's a big thing because like you have to downsize the number of times, fly a smaller wing. And they're not just small, it's not just the wing size, right? Like flying a 1.0 on a 150 is okay. But, you know, flying a 1.0 on a 119, it's not just being a 1.0. That wing is already engineered to be way more exciting. So I think for women to access better wing loadings, to be more comfortable and get more performance out of the wing, they're already in a situation where they have to fly a much scarier wing than men typically do. So I think those two things together puts them in a position where they're just like, it's just harder out the gates potentially for a lot of ladies.
No, I think you answered that question very well. Another question, which I also had on my list, great minds think alike, is Trent's asked what's your plan in terms of canopy coming back off this forced grounding? And my question to you as well, what would you recommend for everybody when they do go back to just be mindful of and careful of?
Yeah, I will tell you what I'm going to do and why I'm going to do it. I want to do some free flying, right? But I'm not going to do it straight out the gates. Depending how long it takes for us to go back, the Europeans know what it's like to take 6 months off. I don't know what that's like. None of Australians know what it's like. Like, we have the privilege to jump all year round. I am terrified of the idea of going back in a year's time. I hope it doesn't take that long, right? But if it takes a few months, I still want to go and take it super easy. So in terms of free fall, I'm actually going to do some two-way flat, and then introduce some two-way head up, and then two-way head down, and then all the other bits and pieces that we go through incrementally, right? And it's the same with the canopy. I've been flying a lot of Petra. I'm not going to fly Petra, no way. It sounds silly, but I'm going to fly the most relaxed wing I have, which is my Layer 86, which by most standards is not a relaxed wing, but I'm going to do time on that one. I actually upsized from my 79 to my 86 just generally before all this went down anyway. So I'm going to continue to fly the more relaxed wing I have until I feel I've got everything else down pat. But I'm actually going to go back and do a day of 90s, and then do 270s, and then 450s, because I want to make sure I've got the picture right. So the idea is about going back a step. So if you do 90s, just do a straight in. If you do a straight in, you don't really have a lot of options there in terms of reducing that back. If you've got access to a larger canopy, that's probably a good place to start. If you haven't got access to a larger canopy, do ask some friends and really kind of just see if that's available. If it's not available, the best thing you can do is just work on your mental headspace, right? Really understand this is happening, do the breathing, do things deliberately. If you have access to do a hop and pop, please go and do a hop and pop. No one around you, the only thing you're working on is canopy flying. That's probably a good place to start.
Perfect. And someone has also asked, Liam has said, you've mentioned how coaching is very important a few times. So how would we go about getting coaching in Victoria, and who to talk to, and where do I go?
Yeah, it depends what you're doing, Liam. I'm not sure if you're swooping at the moment, but if you need to do some swooping, it's got to be Griggsy at the moment. I don't know what his availability is like. At some point, I want to get my high performance canopy coach rating, so that'll be good. But if it's just for normal landings, I can obviously help with that. I arrange weekends as is convenient for me, but I'm also happy for people who are active and proactive and willing to do all the admin for me, to arrange those weekends as well and say, hey, Simon, I've done everything. Please just turn up and coach. I'm happy to do that too. Yeah, so really your two main canopy coaches, or your two only canopy coaches in Victoria who live here, are Griggsy and myself, but we do get some people who roam in from interstate as well.
Yeah, there are actually quite a lot of, in the past, before all this happened, there were quite a lot of canopy courses happening, and they were mostly advertised through the VTPC Facebook or the particular pages that the drop zones operate. So those are the ones. Most of the canopy courses are advertised online through either APF, VTPC, Ngami, Commandos, Torquay, yeah, and all the drop zones that are available in Victoria. But if you are interested, after this, I think that I will be talking to Simon about doing some stuff, because canopy is obviously a huge thing that will be a huge concern for everybody when we get back and we haven't been jumping.
Yeah, and you know, if that's the right environment for some people, then I'm obviously happy to run a canopy coach, kind of a coach weekend, and sort of look after people in that environment as well. So that's, if that's available to you, then yeah, that's obviously a good thing to access. You're muted, mate.
Again, damn it. Every time. Does anyone else have any questions? I've got a couple more, but I just want to put it to anyone else. Do they have anything? No? Cool. One, another thing that I want to ask is, so what was your first, because I personally, when I had my first big canopy scare, that scared me for a very long time for canopy. What was your first canopy, really scary canopy incident, and how long did it take you to recover from that and to push past that?
Yeah, that video I showed where I almost killed someone and myself. Yeah, that was it. That was a few hundred jumps in. It did take a few hundred jumps to really feel comfortable swooping in tight proximity with people. It actually affected my ability to swoop objects for quite some time, which is actually one of the really fun things about swooping, swooping trees and stuff like that. So yeah, it actually affected me for quite a period of time. But I'd say that some of the other things, like hitting the pond at farm was actually very constructive because it kind of changed my approach for knowing when it was time to abort the turn. So as a result, it's fundamentally changed the way I look at, is it time to swoop? Instead of, is it time to swoop? Is it time to abort? So that's something I put a lot of focus on, is looking for reasons to not do the turn. Yeah. And I'd say that a lot of the things that affected me, they've affected me positively, and I've continued to carry them through, rather than they've made me gun shy and I'm reluctant to keep moving forward, because you have to move forward.
Cool. Does anyone else have any questions at all? No, covered all the bases. Awesome. Okay, well, I think that's, do you have anything to add, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot more I could have covered. I really didn't cover wing technology. I didn't really talk much about, I didn't really show you any competition swooping or anything like that. I guess the intent I had was not to try and talk about competition too much, because that's really not a motivator for a lot of people. A lot of people don't realize they want to get into competition until they're kind of really in the throes of swooping. And if you're in the throes of swooping, you probably know whether you want to compete or not. I guess what I wanted to highlight is that it's a gradual process. It's a step-by-step process. And everyone starts from the bottom, as it was. Everyone starts from, I just come in and land, and I landed on my bum. And then you add a bit of piece on top. It's kind of like making a sandwich. You get the bread, you butter it, you put some stuff down, and you add enough things, and eventually you've got a pretty awesome sandwich, right? Swooping is much the same. It's a really awesome, complicated sandwich, but it's really rewarding when you've made it and you get to eat it. But yeah, you got to be safe. That's probably the other key part as well. Is like rushing stuff doesn't help anyone, doesn't help you, doesn't help the people around you. You definitely don't want your friends to be smearing you off the ground. Spam sandwich, absolutely. Spam sandwich is awesome. Fried egg too. Lots of mayonnaise, I promise you. Yeah, so yeah, taking it easy, going slow, realizing it's going to punish you along the way, but that punishment is good. That punishment is good for building character.
Cool. Loving the sandwich metaphors. They love the chat boxes, yeah, liking the sandwiches. Cool. Well, I think that's a wrap then.
Don't drop the sandwich.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. The next one will be Reed is speaking on Monday. So, and then after that is Gary about flat flying. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to